the last day. Have you enjoyed yourselves so far? Excellent. I'm very happy to hear that. I would say last but not least, because we have another packed day with hopefully a lot of program highlights here on the stage for you, and I want to start out the day by just giving you a quick overview of those. I am extremely excited that in a few minutes, Cory Doctorow is going to be taking the stage, and I hope you all saw his panel, maybe in the main program of South by Southwest, and I hope you've all read his books like Little Brother and Makers, and have educated yourself about the directions this society could take with the tools of science fiction. He's going to be speaking to us today about the EU Copyright Directive, Article 13, upload filters, and why all that is a bad idea. Before that and after Cory, that's the first sort of program element we have today, brought to you by Republica. Republica is a festival in Germany that I get to work for as well. It's not quite South by Southwest just yet, but we're aspiring towards. It's definitely the biggest and most important festival on the digital society that we have in Europe today. You're going to be hearing a little bit more about that in a minute as well. That's the first program element here on stage. Then later on this afternoon, I'm very excited to be hosting the Berlin Pitch event for you. Pitch Perfect. Great title, I think. We've brought some of the best startups of Berlin to present themselves here for you. We're going to have a jury, we're going to have prizes, and I hope you're going to be around for that. We have another meetup this afternoon. We've had a lot of really great meetups here at the BerlinSaloon, and the final one is going to take a deep dive into the partnership between London and Berlin. I don't know if you all know, but London and Berlin signed a special deal with Brexit coming up to make sure that startups from both cities are still able to network and work together, and we're going to be learning more about that later on. So if you're interested in connecting to either one of those cities, either London or Berlin, you should definitely be around for that. And then last but not least, on this stage, we have a panel on the topic of the future of mobility, also brought to you by Republica Festival. Also very much looking forward to that. Before we throw our final closing party, have any of you joined us for the last evenings here at BerlinSaloon? Yeah? I think we've thrown some really good nights here. We had a robot orchestra on the stage yesterday. We're going to have more live acts for you this evening along with our DJs, and I hope you're going to be here to party the last night of BerlinSaloon with us. That's the overview of the day program that we have planned for you. And it is now my pleasure to ask Janine Koch, the director of Republica, to come up on stage and tell you a little bit more about the festival.
Hello, good morning. I'm Janine Koch, Director of Republica, as Geraldine mentioned already. We are very happy to be here. A special thank, right before I start with some more details on the program, to Berlin Partner, which invited us to be here part of this saloon today. So thank you very much for that. And we are very happy to be a part of the Sequencer Tour, because you can probably see it on the right-hand side or on the left from your side. It's a tour. It's powered by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Germany, and also by the Goethe Institute and the BDI, and we are very happy to be a part of it, because there is the Reeperbahn Festival, which is included in the tour, and also the Next Media Accelerator, and we have been in LA so far, which took place in November. This is the second stop, and we will be in June in New York, and then in Portland, and in the end in Detroit, and this has all been a step from the Wunderbar Together tour. So we are happy to be Wunderbar together with you today. And we're going to kick off now with a talk from Cory Doctorow. And there's also a Q&A in the end. This will be a Q&A with Markus Beckedahl, who is here as well. He is a chief editor of Netzpolitik and also a co-founder of Republica. So we are very happy that he is here as well. So stay here and pose your questions afterwards. And very welcome that you're here. Thank you.
Hi, thank you all very much. Thanks for coming. Can we maybe get my slides up soon? All right, there we go. Hi. So I'm going to talk to you today about something that is a particularly dangerous thing, which is something that is both boring and important. So boring, important things are the most dangerous things of all, because nobody notices that they're important until they become interesting. And usually the reason they become interesting is because they've gone horribly, horribly wrong. In 15 days, the European Union is holding the final vote on the Copyright Directive. This is the first update to European copyright law since 2001. It is an acronym salad of numbers and letters, and as I warned you, it's boring, but it's very important. Until last spring, it was just boring, right? Until last spring, nobody had any particular strong feelings about it, and it was doing what European directives do, which is consulting widely, getting expert input, drafting something everyone agrees with, and then just moving ahead with it. But last spring, a German MEP called Axel Voss took over as the rapporteur for this directive. So a rapporteur is like the legislative steward of the directive, and he turned it in a new direction, a kind of radical and catastrophic direction. Voss's version of the directive, it's so controversial that the petition against it has attracted more signatures than any other petition in the history of the human race, right? That's how much of a crisis this has become. And Europe has been rocked by these mass protests, and there's more coming. On the 23rd of May, we're going to have a day of protest across the EU. The vote in the directive is going to be the last thing that politicians do before the parliament breaks up for new elections in May, and they're going to go back and campaign. And depending on how this vote goes, they could be handing a gift to the Eurosceptic parties whose pitch has been that the European Union doesn't listen to normal people, they're unresponsive to the will of the public, the European Union should be dissolved because it just does the bidding of corporations. If the MEPs allow themselves to be whipped by their party leadership into voting for this catastrophic idea, it could really be the beginning of the end of the whole European project. So let's talk about why this is so controversial. There are two clauses that have made this controversial. The first one is something that's often called the link tax. It's Article 11 of the directive. And nominally, the idea here is to force Google and Facebook and other companies that aggregate news to give more money to news media companies for aggregating it. What it does is it gives news sites the power to decide whether or not someone is allowed to excerpt a story with potentially very short excerpts of as little as 1 or 2 words, and as a condition of giving them permission to link to the news, it allows them to charge for that permission. So it gets to set a rate for permission to link to the news. One of the problems with this Article 11 is that it's been very loose about how it defines both news site and excerpt. So it said that member states, each of the 28, soon to be 27 European countries, get to decide what they want to call an excerpt from a news story, and it sets the floor on that as 2 words from the news story. It also doesn't define what a news story or a news site is, so each of the 28 states gets to decide different categories of news operators who get to charge or not charge this, and then somehow online platforms have to make sense of this. Now, if you're only going to allow 1 or 2 words, it becomes very possible that just having a link to the story starts to exceed the permission. If you look at the URL in this Guardian story, which I blew up there, you can see it highlighted in yellow, that URL has more than 2 words from the story in the URL. So just linking to the existence of the news could become something that was subject to permission from the operator of the news site. Now, this is the 3rd time that link taxes have been tried in the European Union. They were tried, I beg your pardon, I skipped ahead here. Article 11 originally had these carve-outs for non-commercial sites like Wikipedia. Obviously, Wikipedia consists of claims, factual claims, and then links to places where those claims can be verified. If you scroll to the bottom of any Wikipedia entry, which I know most of us usually don't do, but we should, you will see further reading and citations, and there are links to all the facts that are asserted. So originally Wikipedia was carved out along with other non-commercial operators. Now that carve-out has been narrowed to the point where it's effectively useless. It can't be deployed. So this presents a kind of existential threat to these collaborative efforts to adjudicate claims, right? To try and make sense of what's true and what's not true by having people say, well, I read this here and I read this there, and we're going to have to argue about it, which is one of the ways to think about Wikipedia. So this is the 3rd time that this has been tried in Europe. It was tried in Germany in 2013 and in Spain in 2014. And what happened then was that Google and the other big news aggregators just stopped linking to newspapers in those countries. And without Google linking to them, no one read the news anymore, and so the newspapers agitated to have this removed from their national laws. So the idea is that if you make this continent-wide, you will kind of call Google's bluff, that they won't dare just stop providing links to the news across all of Europe. But even if this is accomplished, this is going to primarily impact not Google, but all of Google's smaller European competitors, right? Google can, it's true, move some zeros from its balance sheet to the balance sheets of a few aristocratic newspaper families without really hurting too much, but there are tons of smaller European competitors that are really important nationally that don't have these resources. It's also likely the case that the big papers are going to give each other cross-licensing deals so that when one giant newspaper wants to write about what another giant newspaper has said, that they're not going to need to seek out permission in order to do this. So what that's going to mean is that smaller news providers, right, independent press, will have to pay for access to news links for the purpose of critical analysis, whereas the large entrenched players won't. So this is just strengthening both the monopolies of Google and the largest newspaper companies. And then finally, it's going to have this adverse effect on nonprofits like Wikipedia. But Article 11, it's really just for starters. This is, if you can believe it, the least controversial element of this controversy. The big controversy is over something called Article 13. And Article 13 represents a complete redrawing of the balance in copyright online. So since the late 1990s, the way that copyright has worked online is that if you operate a platform where the public is allowed to make material available, you are not responsible for hiring a lawyer to look at every tweet and every Facebook update and every video and every Instagram photo and every Minecraft skin and every fragment of code pasted into a message board where people are talking about programming challenges to make sure that it adheres to copyright law. There, you know, like all of the copyright lawyers that have ever been trained since the beginning of time could not make a dent in that pile of material that's posted every day. So this is how we got platforms. This is how we got online forums, was by exempting platforms from liability. But the quid pro quo for that, the other half of that, is that if I'm a rights holder and I believe my copyright has been violated, I send an email to the online service and I say, that's my copyright, you violated it, take it down. I don't have to go to court, I don't have to see a judge, and they just remove it, or they can be held liable as part of the copyright violation. And so this is a bargain that like no one's particularly happy with, but that we've managed to muddle along with, right? The rights holders will say, well, you know, if you're a movie theater, you don't get to just put movies on the screen, and then if it's ripping off someone's copyright, they can come along and make you stop airing it. And then the speech people say, well, if you're a rights holder, you don't get to just walk into the movie theater, point at the screen and say, that's my copyright, and the projectionist turns off the film. And so everyone gets this kind of streamlined system of justice. There's real potential for abuse, but it has been something that we've all been able to live with over the years. But there have been enormous abuses with this notice and takedown system, this system where you can remove stuff online. It has been a real boon to scammers and bad actors. You know, they can lay claim to public domain works and remove them or monetize them and get paid for stuff that doesn't belong to them. But also things like AIDS deniers will take down videos that talk about how their AIDS denial is bad science, and they'll use fake copyright claims to have anti-AIDS denial videos taken down. The Thai government used fake copyright claims to take down footage of Thai cops beating up protesters during an election. British neo-fascists have used American copyright claims to take down videos that documented their homophobic violence. And notice and takedown still requires that bad actors go out and find the videos they want to suppress. So it is a kind of, it isn't like a thermonuclear weapon. It's more like a indiscriminate scalpel that they can use, but they can't blanket the internet with notice and takedown requests. You still have to do them one at a time, kind of handcrafting them. But there's another approach that's much more wholesale called notice and stay down. So in 2007, YouTube tried to make nice with the biggest rights holders in the world, and they created a thing called Content ID. And the way that Content ID works is that if you're in the pool of trusted rights holders, you can upload your copyrighted works to a database, and then if a YouTube user tries to post something that matches or partially matches anything in the database, that never goes live. It doesn't show up, and then you send a notice saying take it down. It just never shows up. It becomes a corpus of unutterable speech, words that cannot be spoken on YouTube. And since Content ID has rolled out, it has made the abuses of notice and takedown look like small potatoes by comparison. So for example, newscasters routinely will take the entire nightly news and just upload it to Content ID as they broadcast it. So what that means is that when you have things like news stations picking up NASA's live stream of the Mars rover landing, they were claiming copyright to it just sloppily, just carelessly. So the next day, when NASA uploaded its own footage of the Mars lander, newscasters blanketed it with claims, and each one of those claims represented a copyright strike against NASA. And when you get 3 copyright strikes, they delete all the videos you've ever posted, right? So these careless, automated copyright claims, they have lots of victims. There's an indie artist called Adam the Alien last summer. He uploaded him singing Silent Night, Stille Nacht, and there were 3 different copyright claims that took the money that he would have made from him singing this 19th century Christmas carol at Christmas and misappropriated it for giant corporations. And then there's this guy, Dan Bull. He's a nerdcore rapper. He's had all of his videos either demonetized or taken down at one time or another because music companies falsely claim to own his copyrights. Sony, 2 years ago, they licensed stock art from an artist, and then they put the stock art in a music video. And then when the artist uploaded his own stock art as part of his ad for his services, Sony got a copyright strike against him and had his own work taken down. And then, you know, Sony's a kind of repeat offender. There's a pianist named James Rhodes who recorded himself performing a Bach composition, 300-year-old composition. Sony sent a takedown to him, and then when he contested it, they sent another takedown. There's another pianist called Dira Venkatraman who uploaded himself playing some Beethoven. Sony took that down too. And then there are all these bizarre overbroad claims like someone uploaded 5 minutes of white noise and got 5 copyright claims for silence. There's a company called Rumblefish that sends takedowns or does notice and stay downs if you upload birdsong. They have managed to upload enough samples of birdsong and claim them that you can't record birdsong and put it on YouTube without attracting a claim from them. That automatically takes it down. It never goes live. You then have to contest it and wait for YouTube to adjudicate your claim. And then most worrying is how this is used for active censorship, not just passive, careless censorship, but active and malicious censorship. So this guy, Fat Rat, he had a super viral music video, millions of views, and a scammer had it taken down and then had all the money diverted to his account using Content ID. Lionsgate uses copyright claims to take down critical videos that are bad reviews of their movies. And after a couple of weeks, the videos get put back up again, but they managed to have 2 weeks with no bad reviews on YouTube by doing this. Blackmailers have started using Content ID to take down videos from YouTubers, and then they send them direct messages saying, give me $150 in Bitcoin, I'll rescind my claim. So these outcomes are not surprising, but they are predictable. If you make a content matching algorithm, it can't figure out whether someone is legitimately a rights holder or not. All it can do is take the claims made by people identified as rights holders and apply them to the videos that get uploaded. And it can't distinguish between an infringing use and fair dealing or fair use. It can't tell when you're uploading a copyrighted song and when you have just recorded your child's first steps while some music was playing in the background that happens to be a little bit of copyrighted music. It can't tell if you're uploading a copyrighted photo and whether you're a news photographer who's taken a picture of a riot or a police violence just as a bus went by with an ad with some stock imagery from Corbis, right? Machines are not capable of adjudicating these fine claims. And so when you make a system that subjects all of our online speech to automated takedown, you should absolutely expect that this would happen. So any corporation that has billions of users like YouTube is not going to spend a lot of money or even have enough money to spend to make sense of those claims quickly, right? If you have millions of erroneous claims and millions of contested claims, you really can't staff up a room full of moderators who are smart enough to make sense of those claims in real time So there's always going to be delays, right? And sometimes those delays can stretch into weeks and months, especially when the person on the other side gets the putback notice and says, oh no, actually this really is my copyright. You shouldn't allow them to put it back. And then the adjudicating the claim becomes stickier and stickier. So for all the pain that Content ID creates, there's one group of people that's completely unaffected by it, and that's pirates. Because pirates can test Content ID's limits for free, right? You can create as many YouTube accounts as you want, and you can rotate and otherwise transform a video that's blocked by Content ID until you find the transformation that Content ID doesn't detect. And so the first people to line up and say that these filters don't work are rights holders, because they are the ones who are complaining that their videos are being pirated like crazy. So let's get back to Article 13 and how this applies. Article 13 eliminates this idea of safe harbor and replaces it with universal notice and stay down, with filters. Under Article 13, you have a shift from this liability regime where your users get to put stuff up, and then if someone tells you to take it down, you take it down, to one where you are responsible for making sure that your users never post anything that infringes on copyright, even momentarily. So providers are responsible for every forum posting that their users make, every tweet, every blog post, every Facebook update, every photo sent to Instagram or Snapchat, every Wikipedia update, every YouTube and Vimeo update. So early versions of Article 13 said that the way that they would manage this responsibility is by having filters. But filters are terrible. And so when they said, oh, we'll just mandate filters, that became something that was really easy for people opposed to it to point out, well, we've all had experience with these filters. The filters don't work. They're very expensive. We shouldn't force people to use filters. And so they dropped all mention of filters from the directive. And now what they say is you don't have to use a filter. You just have to find some way of screening billions of updates every day. It doesn't have to be a filter. It can be anything you want. So one of the problems that people raised with filters is that filters cost a lot of money, right? There's the Content ID, YouTube's big filter. It costs $60 million to develop. They've spent another $40 million since 2007 operating it. So that's $100 million to build a filter that just looks at video and just adjudicates claims from a small number of trusted rights holders. Building something like this that could manage all media type that's uploaded to every service on the internet is hundreds of millions of dollars or euros in expense. There's only 5 companies in the world that operate platforms that can afford this, and they're all American. And so one of the things that happened when they started to mandate filters is that small and medium-sized European enterprises, particularly German ones, started to show up at their MEPs' offices and say, you are going to snuff us out and hand control over Europe's internet to GAFA, to the 5 American big European, tech companies. So over time they eliminated all mention of filters from the copyright directive, but it's not really fooling anyone. You know, if I say to you, I require you as a matter of law to find a large African 4-legged mammal with a tail and tusks and a trunk, even if I don't say you need to find me an elephant, we still have an elephant in the room, right? Even if I write, by the way, if at all possible you should avoid elephants, you're still going to show up with an elephant. And so this has been completely implausible, and that's how we've ended up with these mass protests, because no one's fooled. So the opposition has grown and grown and grown, and as they've been unable to use obfuscation to cut off the opposition, they've switched to smear campaigns. So the EU issued a memo, they published it on Medium, in which they called the opponents to this. Remember, the petition has more signatories than any other petition in human history. They called us a mob. They said that everyone who objected to the directive was a bot operated by Google. And one German politician, he tweeted that he could tell that all of the opposition was bots operated by Google because all these alleged constituents of him that wrote to him, they all had Gmail addresses. So therefore, it was just an automated process that Google had cooked up. Last weekend, members of the European Parliament were blanketed with this 21-page report that claimed that American interests were interfering in European law, and that almost all of the tweets objecting to Article 13 had originated from Washington, D.C. The tool they use to analyze Twitter, if it doesn't know what location you're in, it takes the language you're speaking, and it assigns your location to the capital city of the largest country where that language is spoken, right? So they had Julia Reda, a German MEP who is in Strasbourg, as being located in Washington, D.C. And even after this gross incompetence in analytics was pointed out to them, they doubled down on the claims, and they continue to say that all of the opposition to this has been mounted by American big tech trying to defend their turf. So the scale of opposition to Article 13, it cannot be overstated. There's a letter that was signed by 70 internet luminaries, Tim Berners-Lee, who invented the web, Vint Cerf, who co-invented TCP/IP, and other technologists, the creators of DNS and so on, people who are really deep on this. There was a letter signed by Europe's leading copyright experts, a letter signed by the investigative journalists who led the Panama Papers and Paradise Papers investigations, the German Data and Privacy Commissioner, the EU's, or the European, or United Nations Special Rapporteur on Human Expression, and again, all of those people who signed that petition, they have all come out against this. So big tech is too big, and the biggest part of big tech is American big tech, and it is way too big, and it is incredibly abusive. Lax antitrust enforcement over the last 40 years has allowed a few companies to grow to dominate the internet. We now inhabit an internet made up of 5 big services filled with screenshots from the other 4, right? That is a serious problem that we need to address, but that matters, right? Because the internet is not just a glorified entertainment system. It's like the nervous system of our species that spans the planet and wires us together. We use the internet not just for entertainment, we use the internet for like employment and education and romance and family and civic and political engagement. So getting the balance right with competition is super important. But we can't do that by giving big tech this perpetual advantage where we snuff out all the potential competitors. We can't do that by assigning big tech hundreds of millions of euros worth of policing duties, because then when it comes time to break them up, they will say, well, if you break us up, we can no longer perform the duties that you've deputized us to perform, that really the state should be performing, because companies are not good at regulating themselves. So a monopolist's first preference is always not to be regulated, but their second preference is always to be regulated in a way that only they can comply with and no competitor could ever comply with. And this is why YouTube and Facebook have both quietly come out in favor of filters. Not mandatory filters, not filters the way Article 13, but they're like, oh no, we should definitely have filters. They should just be filters that are a little more like the filters we have and a little less like the filters anyone else could ever possibly make. Now, artists also need a better deal, but giving more power to record labels and publishers and movie studios is not a way to line the pockets of artists. Artists are living in the same problem that we all live in with big tech, which is that we live in a world with 5 big publishers, soon to be 4, 5 big movie studios, soon to be 4 big record labels, right? There is a buyer's market for what we're selling, and what that means is that when we go to negotiate our contracts, they say you can't negotiate because the same deal we're offering is the same deal you get from everyone else, and if you don't like that deal, no one is willing to make your work available. They've choked off the path to our audience. And so if we allow big tech and big content to merge, right, whether or not we're transferring some zeros from the balance sheet of Google to the balance sheet of Bertelsmann or the other way, it doesn't matter to us artists, right? When big tech and big content sit down to make a meal out of people like me, I don't care who gets the bigger piece, right? And so this is not going to solve this problem. When was the last time a media company had a bumper year and increased its royalty rates to share that with the artists, right? Any new money that goes into the media company's pocket goes to their shareholders, not to the suppliers. But any benefit to media companies is going to be limited in any event. Because if you think Google and Facebook are too big now, give them 10 years with no competition, and they will be so big that they will squeeze us and squeeze us and squeeze us. And they'll squeeze the publishers and studios and labels that represent us. And while the publishers and studios and labels never share their bounty with us, they sure as hell share their pain with us. Right? When they have a bad year, that we're the first ones in line to see cuts to our payment, our share of the income. So that brings us to today. We have mere weeks to go before the worst internet policy in the history of a democracy becomes potentially law. days to go before these protests in Europe, and whether or not you're a European, this matters to you. So if you're a European, these are the URLs. Pledge2019.eu, that's where you ask your lawmaker to promise to vote against the copyright directive. SaveYourInternet.eu, this is how you write to your MEPs. And Change.org, that's where that petition is hosted. So tell your friends to visit these sites yourself, sign the petition. And if you're an American, tell your European friends. The destiny of the internet, this is not the most important fight that we have, right? There are far more important fights than how we regulate the internet. Heading off climate change, doing something about inequality, addressing long-standing issues of racial and gender bias. All of those things are way more important than the internet, but we will fight and win or lose those fights on the internet. And so unless we have a free, fair, and open internet, we lose those fights before we start. And so right now, even though the internet is not the most important thing in the world, this is the most important thing for us to be working on. Thank you. This is going to come up, and we're gonna chat. Do we sit or stand? Let's sit. All right.